Welcome to our 186th Right and Left Discussion Forum. We hold our televised discussions twice monthly to demonstrate the value of civil, productive, open-minded political dialogue. Today, our panel will discuss the differences between capitalism and socialism and probably make a value judgment or two about which is better for the United States. Today's panel includes Dr. Ronald Chamberlin, retired senior research chemist, and Joe Gaines, former faculty member of the University of Akron and Wadsworth High School, Patty Haskins, member of the Wadsworth City Council, and Bryan Laubaugh, president of R&B Financial Services. Ron, according to many polls, socialism is beginning to gain on capitalism as a preferred form of government for the United States. Is that something we should be worried about?
Don, I don't really think so. I don't think there's a pure form of either. As a disclaimer, you notice in my background that I'm a part of the capitalistic society. This is a display from my handicrafts at a local craft fair not too long ago, where I have objects up for sale, and I'm attempting to use the profits and from there on to better myself and perhaps my community. So I'm a bit of a capitalist myself.
Are you greedy?
Pardon me?
Are you greedy?
Am I greedy?
Doesn't that word go?
Because I think one of the problems with capitalism has been that it's a natural sort of system because it's based on human greed. I think we think back on the 19th century with the robber barons there, the Rockefellers and the Goulds and so forth, that we see a cause for alarm there, where they tremendous exploiters of labor, cheap labor from China and from Ireland and child labor and all the rest of that. That being said, there's certainly individuals who are not who do give back to the community. I think of Andrew Carnegie, established hundreds of libraries throughout the East and the Midwest, not so much in the South, since in that time the Southern and Western states were less established. Present day, we have the Warren Buffetts and the Bill Gateses, and you can't tune into a PBS TV station without seeing a list of donors and foundations that are set up by wealthy people to support that. I think that most of us have at least some degree of agreement with the idea of giving some of our proceeds to the state to do things. In my capitalistic venture, I do contribute the sales taxes back to the government. We don't mind paying some of our wealth to the state to set up things like fire departments and police departments and fix the roads and the rest of that. I think maybe the problem is that how much of a curb this is, how much of this we're willing to go to. The Bernie Sanders and the folks of the new wave are certainly want to go a lot further than many do. I think government regulation, I think Bryan has in the past, will probably tell us again, how government regulation of business has been at least onerous, if nothing else, at least difficult to take care of and that sort of thing. So on the other hand, thinking back again on child labor and all that, there's some government regulation of business needs to be done. And particularly a problem when we have politicians and capitalists getting together to get favors. We have a recent thing going on here in Ohio just now that is pretty bad, with an energy corporation contributing to politicians in order to get some favorable legislation for themselves. That's part of greed, I think, and it's there. Not that socialists aren't greedy too. They want to get some benefits for themselves with their tax dollars and giving their money to the government. So I think we need to look at that. What the good that has come out of the general population of working against capitalism. We just celebrated Labor Day, and Labor Day, the union movement has given us weekends and 40-hour work weeks and minimum wage and that sort of thing. You got to look at capitalists who minimum wage is a very, very low minimum. It's not enough to live on for families, particularly. It's difficult. So can it be more equitable? We talk about tax reform in the past, we talk about flat taxes. I don't believe in saying to rich people or capitalists that, no, you got to distribute all your wealth to people. Stories told about John D. Rockefeller. People would come up to him and say, you should distribute your wealth to all of us. And he would say, well, according to my calculations, if I give everybody in the United States a portion of my wealth, you all get 10 cents. So he'd hand the man a dime and say, here's your share. So I think that's probably true. We're not going to be enough to go around, even if we take it all from the rich people. So is socialism going to be a problem? I don't really think so, because again, we have capitalists who are going to fight this, who are going to try to control it, who are going to modify, and each is going to be a check and balance on the other. I think evolution will take place, and it will be what it will be. So it's something you need to wait and see. And at my age, it's not going to affect me a whole lot, maybe. So that's my take on it so far.
Okay, Joe, what are your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts are that it's interesting that as soon as you say the word socialist or socialism, you take it as a negative. I mean, if you want to call somebody a name today, you'd say he's a socialist. And that's negative. Why? Why does it have to be negative? My point is that in many cases, socialism is part of the American government. Has to be. Not fully, and shouldn't be fully. When I look at capitalism, I look at the downward theory that, you know, everything goes from the top down. That doesn't always work. It doesn't always happen that way either. In many cases, capitalism is abusive, can be, and can also be the rich get richer. Now, it doesn't have to be that, but it does tend to do that at times. So when we look at socialism, we look at an organization or a system in which people help each other. I'm not against socialism. I'm not for it. I don't want to see a socialist government. I'd vote in every way I can not to have a socialist government. But I also think that we need some socialism to some degree. When we look at, for example, social security, what is that? Socialism. What about people that need certain things and can't get it on their own because of anything from their age to their eyesight to whatever it might be? Socialism is needed. So no, I don't think of myself as a socialist at all. I think of myself as a bad capitalist. Not a very good one, but a capitalist anyhow.
A bad capitalist?
Yeah. Well, I'm not very aggressive. And I think in capitalism, you have to be aggressive to do well. But I believe in it. I believe in the system. I believe in it more than I do socialism. But I also look at socialism and I don't say, oh, it's wrong, because I think we do need it at some point.
I'm wondering if this might not be a good time to inject a couple of definitions before we get to Patty. According to the American Heritage Dictionary, the terms are defined as follows. Capitalism is an economic system in which the means of production and distribution are privately or corporately owned.
Right.
And development is proportionate to the accumulation and reinvestment of the profits gained in the free market. Socialism is a system in which the means of producing and distributing goods are owned collectively, and political power is exercised by the whole community. The theory of or practice of those who support such as socialism. We're talking in real broad terms about who owns and controls the means of production. And I think that when we're talking about socialism, we're tossing the term around or accusing people, we're talking about almost any involvement by the government, whether it's taxation or welfare or we throw on that label of socialism for that. I just wanted to toss that in. Patty, what are your thoughts?
Yes, when I thought about your question, I think, Joe mentioned the negative connotation that goes along with socialism. And I think possibly that is because some people equate the socialism with communism. And,
Right.
There are similarities, but there's really some, quite difference in the communist system. It says in, the manifesto that that change is achieved through revolution, whereas in socialism, that is not the case. Under a socialistic economic society, you would still have democratically elected political figures, because there does have to be that center of politics, whereas in communist societies, they're not there. A truly socialist society and a truly capitalist really don't exist. I mean, the closest that we have to a socialist, not communist, because there are communist countries such as China and North Korea and Cuba. I think Laos is still one. Socialist countries like Norway, Sweden, Denmark are not fully socialistic. They still have private ownership involved in them. And by the way, in a true socialistic society, there can be private ownership. To look at our system and say that it is totally capitalistic is not true either. What we have, I feel, is a hybrid between, which is primarily capitalistic, but it has some aspects of socialism. Some of the things that have been mentioned already are Medicare, Social Security, are examples of the government taking over for the need of people. Ron mentioned child labor laws, minimum wage. All of these are cases where the government has stepped in to put a control. We have others, antitrust laws that are imposed where the government is coming in and saying this company has gotten too large in this capitalistic system, and it's going to have to be reduced for the benefit of all. Eminent domain, where a government agency can step in and take private property for the public good. These are all things or portions of socialism. Now, do I think that we need to be a more socialistic country? No, I really don't. And there are some evils to socialism. I think the biggest complaint is that if you are a socialist and feel that the government should supply your needs and or the common good is for everybody. Everybody pulls together their money and then you get back what you need. It really can encourage people to become lazy as such, in that where is that incentive to strive and do better and work harder if you do not see the gains for it? Within our system presently that we have, which I feel again is still a hybrid, we still have that ability to work for ourselves, to get ahead, because we have a capitalistic society. What I like about our system, though, is that we have those socialistic aspects that help those that cannot produce, that cannot get a leg up, to make sure that everyone has a fair chance at achieving their American dream. So while the systems are different and we do put a negative connotation with one and a positive with the other, we have to recognize that there are good and bad in both systems, and that perhaps the hybrid system that we have going is one of the best ways or things that we could do, as being obviously one of the most successful countries in the world.
Patty, why are you a Democrat?
Why do
You sound like a Republican.
No, I don't think so. I think it depends upon the Democrat that you're speaking of. I do want to help those that are in need. But again, that is not something that, and very honestly, that's not something that's Democrat or Republican. But I feel that Democrats tend to do that and to look out for the other guy.
Yeah. Bryan, do you think Patty sounds like a Democrat or a Republican?
Well, Patty is slowly coming over to the correct side of the aisle.
She's getting
I'm
started.
not entering the dark side yet.
I really think we confuse the definition at times when we try to explain socialism with government provided, I would call them a safety net. Your definition, John, that socialism controls the means of production. And when that has happened in the past, it has failed miserably. All we have to do is point to Venezuela recently. We can point to the USSR, the United Soviet Socialist Republic, that is basically governed by the Communist Party. But I would think that if you were talking to someone from Russia, they would consider themselves a socialist. They control the means of production. They provide all the benefits that the Central Planning Committee deems fit for their citizens, and they take away incentive. And I think that's one of the big differences when we talk about socialism and capitalism. Socialism takes away the incentive that human innate, in our DNA to achieve things. Ron wouldn't be working in his wood shop if he knew that the government set the prices for his candlesticks or his pens. Ron wouldn't have any incentive to go to the farmer's market if he knew that the things that he produced, the government was going to tax at 50 or 60%. I think the folks in the Nordic countries would argue strenuously that they are not socialist. They basically provide a social safety net, which their citizens pay for. They have some of the highest taxes when compared to all the other countries out there, and they feel good about that. Now, if as a country, if we want to pay, north of 50% of our income, plus a VAT tax, all those Nordic countries have a 25% VAT tax. Everything
What
that you
was
buy.
that?
Now, if you went
Brian, was that a VAT?
a VAT, a sales tax.
Oh,
It's
okay.
a national sales tax. You go to the grocery store, you pay 6% on your food. You go out to eat, there's a 12% sales tax, a national sales tax. That doesn't include the local sales taxes that go along with it. You buy a car in those countries. I don't know if you read that. Look, there was a story a while ago about the guy that got a ticket, and his ticket was based on his income. His speeding ticket cost him like $12,000 because they basically looked at his income and said, you can afford $12,000 for this speeding ticket. Now, I don't believe in that type of socialism. I don't believe socialism works. I believe that we have plenty of examples of socialism over the last 200 years that has turned itself into communism. And this is the problem that people have, is they want to pick out the great parts of socialism and compare it to the bad parts of communism. Of capitalism. Neither system is perfect,
Right.
but we need to do sort of an apples to apples thing. The folks down in Venezuela, it all started out as a socialist movement for the people, of the people, by the people. And in 20 years, they bankrupted that country. They can't get the oil out of the ground. Why? Because people leave. People leave countries like that. Nobody, as far as I know, nobody has gotten in a raft and sailed to Cuba lately. And everybody likes to point to Cuba for their health care. I don't know of anybody that went to Cuba that I know of. Maybe there's some Russian oligarchs that went to Cuba to get to get their heart taken care of. Where do they go? They go to Cleveland, Ohio. Why? Because the doctors there have incentive to be the best that they can be. Now, if I'm laying on a gurney and I've had a heart attack and someone says, where do you want to go? I want the best guy. I don't care how much he makes. I want the guy that is the best heart surgeon in the country. And I would think everybody here would agree that you want the best guy working on you. You don't want somebody that just barely made it through school, that's at the lowest end of his class, and he's working in some national health care. It's interesting to point out when Britain went to a national health system, they had a shortage of doctors. They had to start importing doctors to their country because the people there decided they want to do it. Now, I'll close with this. if you want to see socialism at work and a government-run system, go out to one of the Indian reservations, and you will see government centrally planned, just a mess. We recently, the city of Wadsworth, I think it was last year, maybe Patty can correct me, we sent some of our electrical guys to go out to the reservation to bring electricity to some of these places that have not had electricity. When was the last time you went somewhere in the United States? Now, obviously, if you went down to Mohican and you camped or something like that, you went to a city and you didn't have electricity. I mean, I just think it's amazing that people want to talk about all these great benefits when we can go out and we can see what government does to people. It takes away the incentive. It takes away their just that God-given human DNA to succeed. So that's where I sort of sit on socialism.
You know, and yet there are those strong reasons for capitalism. It just recently, what, year or 2 years ago, an example of capitalism where, and I can't remember the guy's name, but he was very famous, and he had purchased the patent on a particular very commonly used drug.
Yeah.
And he raised it by like 1,000 times. Under a truly capitalistic society, supply and demand, he can charge whatever he wants. But it is the socialistic aspect of our government that came in and said, no, this is not for the common good.
Can't charge $1,000 a shot for insulin. No.
And I would argue that if market forces basically would have corrected that situation, because nobody would have bought it. I mean, how many
If you're
people shop
diabetic and
for
you
gas?
require the insulin injection, you're going to buy it.
Now, I think we're
No.
confusing.
Well, your market would disappear in a hurry.
It did.
Well, they all died.
It's like that guy that went out and started hoarding paper towels and all that stuff down in Tennessee. I don't know, he had like 4 storage units just packed with stuff. And he thought he was going to make a killing. He was going to throw this stuff on Amazon and charge $8 for a roll of toilet paper and all that stuff. He's choking on toilet paper right now.
Didn't really control the market. Usually when this debate gets started, the people who are against socialism like to point to Cuba and Venezuela and Russia and China before they had a controlled capitalism type of system. But then somebody else will come back with, hey, the Scandinavian countries, it works beautifully. Everybody is doing really well. They're happy. They pay a lot of taxes, but they're happy. As Patty pointed out, capitalism or socialism does not exist in a pure form. One example in the Sweden, which is regarded as a socialistic paradise, they have a free market system. There's very little government involvement in business. There are very few regulations, no minimum wage. Socialism is largely confined to education. Each family receives a voucher to be used in any way they want, to go to a private school, a public school, or a religious school. This is not what people normally think of when they think about socialism. In fact, when most of us are talking about talking about socialism, we're talking about government involvement or government welfare, government aid, government regulations, and all of that, which I suppose it's all true. But as I think has been pointed out, let's see, we got 4 people on the panel, at least 3 have pointed out, we don't have a pure system of capitalism or socialism. They don't exist anywhere in the world. I don't think anyway. In this country, of course, we have free enterprise, but we've got a highly regulated free enterprise. Look at what happened during the Trump administration. Very early on, there were a ton of regulations that were eliminated, and a rule was passed saying that if you're going to pass a regulation, you have to eliminate at least 2. Well, the economy exploded at that time, creating the best standard of living that minorities have ever had, because we eliminated just that small amount of regulation, that and the decrease in taxes. But anybody want to weigh in on Mr. Trump? We haven't talked about him for a long time. Joe? Joe, you're muted, Joe. You're muted. Anyway, Ron, what are your thoughts on Mr. Trump now?
Panelists, you have 1 minute.
Mr. Trump's problems are not, for my problems with Mr. Trump were not his economic policies. Involves a whole lot of other things.
Yeah, okay. His personality stinks, right?
The way he applied it to his personality, to the social contract, it stinks.
Yeah. Well, we can talk about that when it comes to Joe Biden's reelection time. Well, thank you very much, folks. We've just about used up our 1 minute that Joanna gave us. And we'll see you all in 2 weeks. If you have any ideas for other topics, please let me know.
You are watching WCTV, Wadsworth Community Television.